Tonight, Ukraine gets a lifeline to hold off defeat.
Okay.
After months of political battles, the House passes a series of bills giving billions to Ukraine and other foreign allies.
I'm sorry, democracy is kind of a messy business, and the reality is it's done.
House Speaker Mike Johnson facing a mutiny from rebel Republicans. What happens next and why the clock may be ticking for TikTok. Also tonight, Israel pounds Gaza as violence in the West Bank surges.
I'm Deborah Patter in the West Bank city of Tulkarem, where residents are mopping up the damage after a two-day Israeli military operation.
Plus, historic trial.
I'm Chanel Call in New York, where in just hours, opening statements will be heard in the first ever criminal trial of a former president.
Deadly crash. A suspected drunk driver plows into a birthday party celebration. At least 2 children are killed. Plus, the cicadas are coming. Why this year's invaders could number in the trillions. And later, price shock. Why costs are soaring at every turn for American drivers.
I'm Jeff Newman in Los Angeles. Car shoppers are facing sticker shock, from the asking price to insurance coverage.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this Sunday. Tonight, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging the United States to send weapons to frontline forces fighting Russian invaders, quote, as soon as possible. Zelensky also praised the House of Representatives for approving billions in foreign aid this weekend that will unleash a flood of American military equipment. But it didn't happen without a fight from hard right Republicans. CBS's Skylar Henry is on Capitol Hill tonight. Skylar, as we know, the Senate is expected to pass this bill in the coming days.
Yeah, Jerika, good evening to you. They could pass this as soon as Tuesday, but the victory lap comes following 6 months of Republican infighting that could put the House speakership in jeopardy again. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the $95 billion bipartisan foreign aid package passed in the House on Saturday will help keep the war with Russia from expanding.
This aid will strengthen Ukraine and send the Kremlin a powerful signal that it will not be the second Afghanistan.
There's more than $60 billion in assistance set aside for Kyiv, including nearly $14 billion to help Ukraine buy advanced weapons systems and defense equipment.
Well, the great news is this is finally happening. It should have happened 6 months ago.
For months, hard-right members of the House vehemently opposed more aid for Ukraine, including Speaker Mike Johnson before he received the gavel. On Saturday, more than half of House Republicans voted no to the measure, leaving Johnson to rely on Democratic support. Now, a small but growing number of Republicans are openly calling to oust Johnson, saying there should be more focus on domestic issues, including the crisis at the border.
He has completely betrayed Republican voters all over the country, and he is absolutely working for the Democrats.
I don't walk around this building being worried about a motion to vacate. I have to do my job. We did.
Now, there is pushback from Democrats and Republicans even in terms of any sort of effort to oust Johnson. Also, we should point out that in addition to the foreign aid, the House passed a measure Saturday that would ban TikTok in the U.S. if the app's parent company does not divest from China. The company says that if that were to become law, then it would violate the First Amendment rights of millions of users.
And we'll see what happens with that. Skylar, switching topics, it's a packed final week of oral arguments at the Supreme Court. Give us a sense of what we can expect there.
Yeah, the justices will perhaps hear the most consequential case on homelessness in decades. They'll consider whether it's cruel and unusual punishment to fine or jail someone who is sleeping outside with no place to go. But the main event, if you will, Jerika, will be later on this week, as the justices will also consider whether former President Trump is immune from criminal charges stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
Skylar Henry on Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you. To the Middle East, where this weekend Israeli Defense Forces launched a deadly series of airstrikes on the city of Rafah in southern Gaza, and violence also flared in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. CBS's Deborah Pata is in Jerusalem with more on the impact to children and a warning some of the images are disturbing.
Good evening. Every 10 minutes, a child is killed in Gaza, according to the United Nations. That's nearly 15,000 children in almost 7 months.
Rushed into this world far too early and already an orphan. This doctor works efficiently to help the baby girl breathe, her lungs not yet fully developed. Her mother, Sabrine Al-Sakani, was 6 months pregnant when she was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Rafah last night. But miraculously, doctors managed to save the preterm infant. Nobody else survived the hit on 2 houses. Among the dead, 13 children, the youngest just 2 years old. Here, Israeli Defense Force soldiers prepare for a different mission. But this is not in Gaza. It's IDF footage in the West Bank city of Tulkarem, where they say they conducted a counter-terrorism operation, killing 14 militants in close combat.
Residents are now cleaning up after the operation. What the Israeli military does is it uses bulldozers to dig up the roads. You can see they've been completely destroyed, making sure that residents cannot move freely in the area.
Bulldozers also smashed through anything that stood in their way. Homes and shops were damaged, pipes and power lines severed, cutting off water and electricity. The Israeli military is in the global spotlight right now. A U.S. official told CBS News that since 2022, it's been investigating an IDF unit of ultra-Orthodox soldiers stationed in the West Bank, accused of human rights atrocities, with an announcement expected this week.
Media reports suggesting the unit could be blacklisted from receiving U.S. military aid prompted an angry outburst from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said sanctions against an IDF unit would be a moral low, Jerika, at a time when his country was fighting in Gaza.
Deborah Patta in Jerusalem, we thank you for your reporting. Tonight, we learned of the death of a former Associated Press reporter, Terry Anderson. You may remember him as one of America's longest-held hostages after he was kidnapped from a street in war-torn Lebanon back in 1985 and held for nearly 7 years. Terry Anderson died in Greenwood Lake, New York. He was 76 years old. A historic day in New York tomorrow where opening statements will be heard in the first criminal trial of former President Donald Trump. CBS's Chanel Call is outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan. Chanel.
And Jerika, after a week of being stuck inside this Manhattan courthouse during jury selection, former President Donald Trump was set to attend a campaign rally in North Carolina last night, but was forced to cancel due to stormy weather.
I think we're going to have to just do a rain check. I'm so sad.
Speaking to supporters over a loudspeaker, former President Donald Trump called off what would have been his first campaign event since his New York City criminal hush money trial began.
This is really a concerted witch hunt.
Trump is required to be in court daily, often stopping on his way in or out to rail against the case, accusing him of falsifying business records to hide an alleged affair ahead of the 2016 presidential election. He's pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts. The 12 jurors and 6 alternates chosen last week will be the first American jury to judge their former president.
There are studies that say that 80% of jurors' minds are made up at the end of opening statements. And it's very difficult to change someone's mind if they've made that initial decision.
Prosecutors are also expected to call their first witness Monday. So, Ricky, why don't we know who will be testifying tomorrow?
Judge Merchan feels very strongly that if the witnesses are known to the defense and to the defendant, that they will be harassed by the defendant on social media, and that those witnesses may be intimidated about their testimony or their safety may be in danger.
And tomorrow, 2 of the former president's trials will overlap. Just down the street from here, New York Attorney General Letitia James will ask a judge to reject the $175 million bond payment in Donald Trump's New York civil fraud case. This over new concerns about the company's finances and legitimacy. Jerika?
Chanel Call for us in Manhattan. Thank you. Tonight, police in Chicago are investigating the shooting death of an off-duty officer. A procession of law enforcement officials gathered outside the University of Chicago hospital where 30-year-old Luis Huesca was pronounced dead. The city's police superintendent says Huesca was shot 6 times just before 3 o'clock this morning as he was returning home from his shift. The officer's vehicle was taken from the crime scene and later recovered. Police say a 66-year-old woman faces a bond hearing tomorrow after crashing her car into a building, killing 2 children and injuring several others. CBS's Lana Zach has the latest.
We have a black Escape that went through the building.
The horror unfolded Saturday in Monroe County, about 30 miles south of Detroit. This SUV seen speeding before, plowing 25 feet into a building where kids and their parents were attending a birthday party.
We have several people on the ground as well as several children injured.
First responders described the scene as chaotic with high levels of emotion.
It sounds like we have a 4-year-old trapped underneath the vehicle. Unknown life status at this time.
A total of 15 people, including at least 3 children, were rushed to area hospitals by helicopter, ambulances, and private cars. Some with life-threatening injuries remain in critical condition.
2 of the victims were pronounced deceased at the scene. This includes an 8-year-old female and a 5-year-old male who are siblings of each other.
The driver, a 66-year-old female, was arrested and charged with operating a vehicle while intoxicated. Authorities, who have not released her name, say she will likely face other criminal charges. Lana Zach, CBS News, New York.
Well, today, video was released of a remarkable rescue in Minnesota. Good Samaritans jumped into action Thursday along Interstate 94 in St. Paul after a car hit a guardrail and then burst into flames. They made several attempts to open the vehicle's door. Finally, the driver was pulled out through the window. Police say no serious injuries were reported. Scientists say this spring will bring a rare invasion of cicadas. So rare, it hasn't happened since 1803. For all you history buffs, that's the same year Napoleon sold the Louisiana Territory to Thomas Jefferson. Here's Emily Fannin of our CBS affiliate, WDJT in Milwaukee.
Around mid-May, cicada noise will be in full swing. And while this high-pitched buzzing occurs every year throughout the Midwest, experts say this year will be unique due to a rare emergence of cicadas that hasn't happened since the 1800s.
We just had that solar eclipse recently. You only have so many opportunities in your life to see and witness something like that. And the cicadas are very similar.
PJ Leash is an extension entomologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's also referred to as the Wisconsin bug guy.
These are the cicadas that we'll be seeing emerge in large numbers this year.
Parts of southern Wisconsin will experience these periodical cicadas, which only emerge every 13 or 17 years, a cycle scientists don't have a clear answer for. They're referred to as broods, and more than a dozen states will experience these 2 types of cicadas at the same time, which Leach says will create a much louder and at times annoying noise.
Say a grove of trees behind us with singing male cicadas, that might be in the range of 70 to 80 decibels, which could be similar to a vacuum cleaner. But if you are really close, it could be more in the range of 90 to 100 decibels, which is really, really loud.
While the noise from cicadas can be a little disruptive, overall, they do produce some environmental benefits, such as being a valuable food source for insects and other predators, as well as improving water filtration into the ground.
That is going to be very similar impacts to if you paid to have your lawn aerated.
The cicadas are expected in big numbers, hundreds of trillions of them, maybe more, across 16 states. For CBS News, Emily Fannin, Madison, Wisconsin.
Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, the rising costs of getting and staying behind the wheel. Plus, a legendary lodge is shining once again. Stay with us. Drivers are facing the worst sticker shock in a generation. Take used car prices. They now average $25,600. That's nearly 25% higher than 5 years ago. From loans to insurance, costs are soaring at every turn. In tonight's Weekend Journal, CBS's Jeff Nguyen in Los Angeles explains some of the reasons why.
There you go. There you go.
Karen and Marissa Hood and baby Noah have been looking for a new car since January, only to find sticker shock.
Now you're looking at the payments and it's just kind of crazy.
Last month, the average price of a new car was just under $47,000, and the average new car payment was north of $700. Also in March, the average interest rate for a new car loan was more than 7%, used nearly 12%. As for finding something affordable,
the 20,000 vehicle's dead. If you want a $20,000 vehicle, you're buying a used car.
What will it take for prices to turn around?
In the end, if consumers don't buy, prices will come down.
Things may be turning around. Bo Bachman owns a car dealership group in Los Angeles where inventory has been sitting longer.
Now we're getting incentives back. Most of our interest rates are between 2.9 and 0%.
But then there's the cost of insurance. The latest Consumer Price Index shows a 22% increase over last year. Safety features, do they affect insurance rates?
There's backup cameras, there's sensors. All these things cost quite a bit more to repair. So a bumper went from being $1,000 repair to maybe a $10,000, $20,000 repair.
Come here.
The Hoods recently purchased a used Tesla. They're looking to add a 3-year-old Ford Explorer priced at $40,000.
We're looking at new cars and we realized that we could get 2 used cars.
The New York Fed says auto loan delinquencies are at their highest level since 2008 because of higher prices and ballooning interest rates. Jeff Nguyen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, Let's Dance, a Footloose finale, and farewell at an iconic high school. That's Kevin Bacon in the 1984's Footloose. The film's prom scene took place at a high school in Payson, Utah, 40 years ago. Well, this weekend, Bacon returned to Payson and kicked off his Sunday shoes. You get it? The school launched the hashtag Bacon to Payson to get the actor to visit. It worked. The building is closing next month. Another 80s film making news tonight, The Shining. That's because of the Oregon Lodge where the movie was filmed is back open for guests. A fire broke out in the attic of the historic Timberline Lodge in Mount Hood last week, forcing staff and guests to evacuate. Luckily, no one was hurt. Tomorrow, a big birthday at Disneyland. The It's a Small World turned 60 years old. The attraction was built for the 1964 World's Fair in New York and later moved to Walt Disney's new theme park in Anaheim, California in 1966. Next on the CBS Weekend News, how a tropical forest project in Puerto Rico is providing a window into our warming world. Tomorrow is Earth Day. A new CBS News poll finds 2/3 of Americans think it is their responsibility to do something about climate change right now. One scientist is going to great lengths to do her part. Here's CBS's David Schechter.
A hotspot for research. That's one way to think of this plot of Puerto Rican forest strung with high voltage lines.
Hi, I'm Tana.
David. Dr. Tana Wood is a research ecologist with the U.S. Forest Service who studies how tropical forests will respond to climate change.
How can we give this window into a future warmer world hundreds of years into the future?
Those black panels are electric heaters running 24/7, warming up this plot of the jungle by 7 degrees Fahrenheit. She says worst case scenario, that's how much warmer it could be on Earth by the end of the century if we keep emitting heat trapping carbon from our cars, factories, and power plants. This experiment was interrupted by Hurricane Maria in 2017. And ever since, the plants in the heated section have struggled to recover. Dead leaves, stunted growth.
This looks totally different.
We have begun to notice that the forest has become shorter and shorter as time has gone on. And so you can visibly see that the forest is experiencing stress under these conditions.
When trees and plants die and decay, they release carbon. Fortunately, healthy trees and soil absorb more carbon than what's being released. But Wood is finding their ability to keep doing that might be in jeopardy. Her team is making hundreds of measurements of the forest, recording the growth of plants, looking underground at the health of the root system, and this device records how much carbon the soil is releasing.
So after 1 year of warming, we saw a major increase in the amount of carbon dioxide that was coming out of these soils.
Her experiment is showing us rising temperatures cause forests to release more carbon. More carbon in the atmosphere causes the planet to get warmer, and the cycle continues.
What happens in these ecosystems has far-reaching consequences for the climate as a whole.
David Schechter, CBS News, Puerto Rico.
Well, coming up on 60 Minutes, Anderson Cooper joins comedian Kevin Hart in the gym. For now, that's the CBS Weekend News for this Sunday. We thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jerika Duncan in New York. Have a great night.